Today's episode of Dead Rabbit Radio contains no feces. When a young girl dies, does her spirit still linger? And if so, how lonely is her existence? And then we take a look at the story of a small community that experienced a massive paranormal event. But what happens when only half the town realizes something paranormal just happened, and they don't know what to do next? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. Hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a ton of stuff to cover today, so first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, returning from yesterday's episode. Get on your feet and give it up for Mr. Slash for Sass. Woohoo! Yeah! Wee! Running on in, excited to be on this episode, and not just yesterday's episode, which is quite disgusting. Mr. Slash for Sass made a donation during our Thanksgiving live stream. That is why he is going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. You guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon or the merch store or whatever. Totally fine, it really is. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Also, quick update. March 27th through the 29th is the Oregon Ghost Conference, and I will be speaking there. It's in Seaside, Oregon, and I will be speaking there. I'm doing a presentation on haunted clothing. So hope to see some of you guys there. There will be details in the show notes if you'd like to get a ticket. It's always a blast. It's a lot of fun going to these conventions. It really, really is. Okay, let's go ahead and get this party started. Mr. Slash for Sass. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the Dead Rabbit Dune Buggy. Everyone climb on board our desert traversal vehicle as Mr. Slash drives us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command all the way out to a small town in anywhere, USA. As we're riding out there, I want to tell you this real quick. You know, I started driving again recently. I didn't drive for like 11 years, 14 years, whatever it was. And last year, I got a car. Driving around the town of Hood River, where I live. Now, I used to drive a lot in Sacramento, where I grew up and where I spent most of my life. And I got... I'm trying to think of a easy way to say this. But that will involve no follow-up questions. I became particularly skilled at following people for long distances. In my car, I would trail people for this, that, or another reason. And sometimes I'd have a friend with me in the car, and they'd be like, damn it, why? I thought we were just going to go to Denny's. I thought we were going to get some delicious food. Yeah, but first I got to take care of something. We'd be following this guy through the city. And when you have someone in the car with you that you can kind of monologue with, because they're too terrified to open their mouth, they're afraid they might become an accessory. It's funny because a lot of the stuff that I did, that I trailed people, I followed them in their vehicles, some of it you learn through books. What book are you reading? How to Be a Serial Killer? Some of it you do learn through books and stuff like that. Some of it you pick up along the way. I always had these tricks, right? First off, my car is unremarkable. I never drive a car with a personalized plate or a bumper sticker or something shiny that can be observed from far off. Very, very generic stock cars. That's what I always drive. That helps. The other thing is you want to stay, 2 to 3 cars behind them. You never ride on their tail. When you learn to follow people, when you learn to trail them for an extended period of time, you also learn how to not get trailed yourself. You also learn what I use to track someone down when I'm following them. I know that people aren't as adept at some of this stuff. And so I'm really good at picking up if someone's following me. And throughout my life, this has happened not a huge amount of times, but there'd be, more than once when someone was trying to find out where I lived or where I worked or something like that, or just where I was going that day. Another thing I always did is I never parked near where I was going. So if I was going to Target, I would park all the way on the other side of this huge mall in Citrus Heights. He had Birdcage Walk, he had Sunrise Mall. I would park so far away from Target if I had to go shopping at Target. My friends hated that. I never parked in front of the place where we were going. You want a Starbucks? Well, let's park at this other coffee shop 2 blocks away. People would complain when they drove with me because they always knew I was going to park far away, but I'd always have the same response. We're both still alive, aren't we? So obviously this is working out. The fact that people still got in the car with me, people who knew me very well, they're like, I don't know why I'm riding around with this lunatic. You learn how not to get trailed yourself. Well, you can't really avoid getting trailed. You learn how to know if someone's following you. That's a better way to put it, because you're in 2 vehicles. I mean, unless you're going to have an open firefight in the middle of the street, or, sometimes I've blown through stop signs or ran red lights and things like that. And that will usually lose a tail. They're not going to do that, because the second I run the red light and they run the red light, now, one, I know I'm being followed, and it's no longer subtle. Now I can prepare for what comes next. So most people won't do that. But you learn to detect if someone's following you if you follow people a lot yourself. What I've noticed in the past, month or 2, I'm being followed around town. 2 different vehicles. I couldn't give you much information about the first time it happened. Totally tell they were following me, and there's always a good way to know. You start to make turns that someone on a mission, someone like going to the grocery store, going to the doctor, going to work, would not make those turns. Usually you make one left-hand turn and then you turn left on the next block, like the very next opportunity you turn left. If they turn again, that's a pretty good indicator, right? You think that they've been following you for a while. And then if you make a third left turn, so you're driving in a circle at this point. If they make the third left turn, which a bad follower will, I disengage at that point. If I'm following someone and they make a left turn, and I make that left turn and they make another left turn, I then disengage. I just go straight. I'd rather lose him for now, at least now I kind of have a general idea of where he could be, than to make that next turn and then now he knows he's being followed by whoever. He doesn't know who I am, right? I break off. I'll try to find him again and get more information, but that's an easy way to find out if you're being tailed. And that happened to me pretty recently, and it was at night. I didn't really get a good look at the car. And I go, someone's following me. I'm not a paranoid person, but I also think, you cover all this stuff about gang stalking. What if you're losing your mind? Like, what if you're just becoming overly paranoid, which is a worry of mine. I got followed again 2 days ago. And this was not at night. I got a clear look at the vehicle. It followed me for quite a while, and I wanted to go to the grocery store. I wanted to buy some macaroni and cheese. But, a couple blocks, it was probably about a half a mile before I even hit the store. Yeah, the speed limit's real slow in Hood River, so you're driving slow everywhere. This car's clearly following me. But I didn't know for sure, right? You never know for sure. So when I'm driving through the Safeway parking lot, I think, okay, I'm going to skip this lane, the most convenient, easiest lane to pull into to get a parking spot. I'm going to go down this lane instead. I'm in the parking lot. And the car behind me also skipped the first turn and turned down the middle one. And I go, okay, this person's clearly following me, because any rational person would have made that first turn to get a closer parking spot. So I just made a loop around the parking lot and left. I didn't get my macaroni and cheese. I just drove around town for a bit. I lost it, right? And then I came home. Why was that person following me? And I believe it was a woman following me the second time. Why is she following me? She followed me for quite a while, and maybe she wasn't following me. Maybe she wanted to also park in the more inconvenient spot, but it seemed odd. And then I started to kind of put stuff together. There's 2 things that I think factor into this. One, it's really cold up here, and I hate the cold. Anything lower than 65, minimum, I'm very uncomfortable. And so even when I'm driving in my car, I'm wearing my big heavy jacket, I'm wearing my gloves, I'm wearing my beanie, and I'm wearing a mask. I'm wearing a baklava. Baklava? Whatever. I'm wearing one of those. I have the heater on. My heater's set at 83 degrees. I'm basically a reptilian at this point. And also, my job requires me to have a walkie-talkie with me. And on a good day, I remember to leave the walkie-talkie at work so it can charge up. But sometimes I forget. I'm just in a hurry to get out of there, or I'm distracted or whatever. So I'll have a walkie-talkie on my belt when I'm like walking around town. I think there are people in town who think I'm ICE. I think there are people in town who are following me because they're doing one of those ICE patrols. That's the only reason I can think of why 2 different vehicles would follow me within a month or two. Probably the last 6 weeks. I think they think I'm ICE. I think driving around with a mask on, and because I remember one day I walked into the grocery store and had the walkie-talkie on my belt, which was visible, and I thought, this is probably not the greatest look. Because if you've seen an adult with a walkie-talkie, it generally means one of 2 things: law enforcement or construction. But I think that's why I'm being followed. And what's funny is that I don't know, like, I guess you, Jason, I was about to say I don't know how to stop it. You go, I have an idea. Don't wear your mask while you're driving around. The walkie-talkie, someone has to see you walk into a store. And what's funny is, let's say that woman was following me because she was part of one of these ICE patrols, and I wasn't aware that I was being followed, and because I had my walkie-talkie on me that day as well, and that's kind of when it hit home. I go, if she had seen me get out of my car and she saw my walkie-talkie, 100%. And I'm wondering if my license plate is out there. And that's why 2 different cars have picked me up. I wonder, because it's a very generic car, is what I drive. And a lot of times law enforcement drives very generic cars. If I've been spotted walking around with my walkie-talkie and a mask, right, I'll sometimes pull it down at the store. Usually I do, just to be polite. So I'm not talking to a cashier and I look like a bank robber. But you see me walk through the parking lot, I have a mask on, I have a big black walkie-talkie on my belt, and I get in a car and drive away. I wonder if my license plate is out there. It could be losing my mind, right? I could be getting paranoid. It's possible that both times I actually wasn't being followed, they also made very improbable turns. The first time I couldn't even really tell. There's a truck following me one night, and it followed me farther than it should have, and I began to make some turns, and it made those turns, and then I booted out of the area and came back a half hour later. So yeah, now interesting stuff, right? I mean, I could totally see someone making that mistake if they saw me with the walkie-talkie, saw me with the mask driving around. But it's also, I'm not scared or anything like that, but it is weird, right? Definitely weird. Or it's even more weird because I'm losing my mind. I'm being gang stalked. But no. Anyways, that was a little segment for you there, right? You're like, oh yeah, Jason, my favorite podcaster gets mistaken for an ICE officer, yeah. And a little tip for you, if you ever think you're being followed, just make 3 left turns in a row or 3 right turns in a row, and then you'll know for sure. You'll know for sure. I don't recommend running stop signs or red lights or anything like that. I've done it, obviously, to lose a tail, but I won't do it to follow someone, right? Because I'd rather them not know I'm behind them. Anyways, so let's go ahead and move on to this first story. Mr. Slash for Sass drove us in the Dead Rabbit Dune buggy all the way out to this neighborhood. We're going to take a look at a young girl who don't have a real name. I think I have her real name. We don't necessarily have her real name. Her on-screen username is Deathcab for Katie. So I'm assuming her name is Deathcab. I'm just joking. I'm assuming her name is Katie. I totally forgot about Deathcab for Cutie. Wonder if they're still around. Anyways, Katie, she's an adult now, but back when she was around 6 or 7, she had, you know where this story's going, past tense, she had a best friend who she names Tanya. She used the real name in the story. When Katie was a little girl, her best friend was Tanya. Her best friend Tanya was also very sick. Terminally ill. She's not going to live much longer. And Katie's aware of this. Family's aware of this. It's just one of those things that I never dealt with that as a kid. I can't even imagine dealing with that as a kid. Heartbreaking. And Katie has to go through this, and Tanya has to go with this as well. Imagine if you knew the clock was ticking and you were just a kid. One day, Katie was at basketball practice. I actually had to look up if people play basketball at that age. I was like, what is that true? Do 6-year-olds play basketball? Apparently they do. They have leagues that young, or at least training that young. Anyways, Katie gets home from basketball practice one early evening, right? It's not super late, not super dark. She walks into the house, and she walks right up into her bedroom because she needs to drop some stuff off. Her parents are downstairs getting dinner ready. She walks into the house. I'm assuming basketball practice was probably within walking distance or someone dropped her off because her parents were preparing a meal already. But anyways, Katie comes home. She goes upstairs to her bedroom to drop some stuff off. And when she gets up there, the bedroom door's open, the bedroom light is off, and sitting on the edge of her bed, in the semi-darkness, again, it's not super late, sitting there on the edge of the bed is Tanya. Tanya's sitting on the edge of the bed, but she's not looking at Katie. She's just sitting there looking down at the floor. And Katie goes, "Oh, Tanya, I didn't know you were coming over tonight. Awesome." That's when Katie reaches over and she flicks on the light switch for her bedroom. The bedroom's empty. Katie's like, "What?" She can't really figure out. She clearly saw Tanya. She doesn't know what that was about. She goes downstairs and she talks to her mom. She goes, "Hey, I didn't know Tanya was coming over. I also didn't know Tanya could vanish into thin air." I think she's still kind of wrapping her head around that, but she clearly saw Tanya. She goes, "I didn't know Tanya was coming over tonight." Mom's like, Katie? "Yes, Mommy?" "Tanya's not coming over tonight." "Well, I just saw her upstairs in my bedroom." "Okay, well, Katie, that's terrifying, and we're going to sell the house today." "Katie, no, Tanya's not coming over tonight, and she definitely wasn't up in your bedroom. Me and your dad didn't know how to break the news to you, but Tanya died today. We didn't tell you because we were trying to figure out how to let you know." And Katie is really kind of trying to wrap her head around this. Obviously she lost a good friend of hers, her best friend. Lost her suddenly, even though it was a long illness. Like, you're at basketball practice, everything's going fine, and then you come home to find out your best friend's dead. But she also is trying to think, like, well then, was that Tanya's ghost in my bedroom? Was that her way of saying goodbye to me? Katie said, she did come to realize that must have been Tanya's ghost. And that's a pretty good assumption. But also, that wasn't the only time she ever saw Tanya. Katie said, for a while, Tanya's parents, Tanya was an only child, Tanya's parents would invite me over for dinner. And I would go. And I would go over to dinner at her place, or her parents' place, and they would invite me to play with her toys and sit at the table and enjoy a dinner with them. Even at the time, Katie felt that it was sad. This was sad, right? It is sad. They're mourning the death of their child, and they're bringing another kid into the home. I don't think they were doing anything creepy. They weren't. You're not, Jason, why would you even imply that? It's parents in grief. "Here, Tanya, we got you new clothes." "But wait, no, I'm Katie." "Yes, Tanya, yes, put on these clothes right now." "But no, I'm Katie." "And play with Tanya's toys. Play with Tanya's toys forever." No, it's nothing like that. They would just be like, "Do you want to have beef stroganoff?" "Yeah, sure, I want to have beef stroganoff." Katie would go over there, eat some beef stroganoff, and leave. But it is sad, right? Parents mourning their child, and even Katie at the time goes, "This is really sad." Not like pathetic, not that she felt bad for him. Well, obviously she did, but there's different types of feeling bad. There's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry you're going through that," and then there's the, you're kind of pathetic that you haven't gotten over this yet. She was the first kind. She was the first kind. She was just sad for them and realized it was just kind of a sad circumstance altogether. But that wasn't all. Katie said a lot of times when they invited me over to the house and I would have dinner with them and play with Tanya's toys, I'd come back to my home, and Tanya's ghost was waiting for me in my house. Not every time, but almost always when I visited with her parents and came back to my home, Tanya was there waiting for me. That is a very sad story. It's interesting, she never talks about talking to Tanya or that any thoughts or feelings were exchanged. The ghost most likely was mute. With a ghost of your dead friend. And again, not seeing her unless she was, other than that first time, unless she was going to Tanya's house and coming home. That's the only time she would see Tanya. She said it wasn't scary, and eventually it just became something that happened. It was part of my life. You know, it was just an event, and it would happen quite often. Nothing creepy, I just accepted it after a while, is how Katie put it. It's interesting, I talk about a lot on the show, how long it takes for a ghost to manifest in the real world. It, from what we can tell, seems to take a while. I have often cited, and I should run this episode as a retro rabbit because I talk about it all the time. I often cite the story about the man who killed himself in front of his girlfriend, and then his ghost instantly appeared next to his own corpse with a look of shock and horror on his face as he's looking down at his body, and then he vanishes and was not seen again as a spirit, if I remember correctly. It was just in that moment. That was always the quickest ghost appearance that I've ever come across. This one also is that same day, her appearing. Now, if that was it, if she just appeared the one time, we do come across stories like that. Ghosts on the day that they die reaching out to a loved one, someone who means a lot to them. Most of the time they do it in dreams. Sometimes they do it in the real world. Sometimes they appear as a ghost. Sometimes it's a smell or a phone call, or in real life this person was associated with moths or blue jays or whatever, a barking dog. And someone across the city, across the state, across the country, when their grandpa died and he really loved millipedes, when he died, you're at work and a millipede crawls out of the potted plants on your desk, which would actually be hilarious. It was me. I put the millipede in there. I was like, hey, I heard your sick grandpa loved these things. That happens. That's a fairly common ghost story. A lot of times it's this feeling that just someone close to you has passed. What makes this story interesting? And I think to appear in that final moment or to send that final message, again, takes a ton of energy. It doesn't take a lot of energy to appear in a dream for a final goodbye, but it does appear to take a lot of energy to make a millipede, really manifest. And the millipede was probably in the potted plant. That's a bad example because millipedes aren't often near humans, but a blue jay singing. That's a very common story. My grandma loved blue jays, and she died, and I was across the city, and a blue jay landed on the hood of my car as I was stopped in traffic, and I go, oh, that's beautiful. What's this little blue jay doing here? And then I found out around the same time my grandmother had died, and I always took that as a message from my grandmother. Very, very common ghost story. I think that is more of the ties that bind the universe, right, than just manifesting a millipede, but it appearing as a ghost in the same day to say goodbye or to just be visible in front of Katie, that does happen. The fact that the ghost kept reappearing and it had a common trigger, visiting the parents' house, that's something different. That's actually a very powerful spirit. It's not a single burst of activity. It's reoccurring. And it's not like every night for a week she saw Tanya sitting on the foot of the bed. It was triggered by Katie going to Tanya's parents' house, coming home, and then seeing Tanya in her own home, which I doubt she ever told Tanya's parents about. Because, she's kind of be another layer of, how's she doing? How's my baby girl doing? Does she miss us? We miss her. And you're like, well, actually, she just kind of sits on the edge of the bed staring at the floor. If anything, it's a little depressing, right? I was hoping when she died, she'd be a bowl full of laughs, make millipedes shoot out of her mouth. And that's it. She doesn't say every time she goes back, Tanya is in that same position, sitting on the foot of the bed, staring down the floor. But just there. And again, it's kind of depressing, right? And I wonder if people get jealous over a ghost. I wonder if the parents would be like, how come Tanya never visits us? I think the answer to this question is because Katie's a child. And children do have a closer connection to the paranormal because they don't have what's real and what's not hammered into their head. But a sad story, right? That connection between two friends. And the fact that it kept getting triggered over and over again. That it was so repetitive that Katie was like, hey, it's just something that happens in the world. A friend dies, they appear in your house. So not until you're older when you realize how rare a story like that is. Ghost stories themselves are fairly rare. Ghost stories where a ghost is physically manifesting in your home, very, very rare. Sounds and feelings and cold spots, smells, those are more common. But interesting story, sad story, right? Those things that connect us all. Tanya probably was very lonely in the afterlife. Or, that's not fair to say, actually, because I believe when you die and you actually go into the afterlife, there is no loneliness or pain or anything like that. But when you're the in-between, when you're a ghost, when you're in between this world and the next one, that is a very lonely existence. So I hope Tanya finally found her way home. But, sad story. Now, okay, here's the thing, right? There's two versions of this story. One was the one I just told you. The other one involved... I have another story to go that I'll tell at some point. Involves a box full of kittens. You'll never guess which one dies. Is it the cat owner? Is it the human who could type the story out online? Or is it one of the 9 kittens who dies? I had 2 versions of this story. And the kitten version, I go, oh, it's really sad. I think it's important. It's not exactly the same. But I go, wow, that's sad. I'm going to share that with all my listeners. I know that they always tune into Dead Rap Radio for heartbreaking content. And so we'll tell that at some other point. But I decided to do this one first. After yesterday's episode, I think we needed a little bit of a lift up. A box full of kittens or a best friend dying. I figured this one... Jason, there's thousands of paranormal stories you can cover. Did you hear the new news? Like, one of the leading Loch Ness Monster experts have come forward and go, it's fake. He goes, he's never faked it, and he's not accusing other experts of faking it, but he's been researching this for decades. He goes, there's no Loch Ness Monster. None. And he starts saying all of the mistakes people have made. He goes, there's not even enough fish in that lake. He goes, it's so cold. There wouldn't be enough fish in that lake to even feed something that big. And he kind of goes through all the mistakes people make. And, maybe he's accurate. Maybe he's not. My personal belief is at one point there probably was a creature in that lake. At some point there probably was. And that's where the initial sightings, before the photographs, before the tourist traps are set up. I think there probably was something in there. But what's really interesting, the very first encounter, this is what makes people roll their eyes. The very first encounter, the very first story that we have written down about the Loch Ness Monster is from 800 AD, 1000 AD. It might even be closer than that, 1500 AD. But still a long time away, where a Christian missionary had gone up that far north into Scotland to spread the word to the pagan tribes. He was bringing the word of Christ, and he was out on the boat with these locals, and the Loch Ness Monster showed up. I mean, they didn't call him that back then, because I don't even know what the lake would have been called then. But the Loch Ness Monster, this giant monster, comes out of the water, and this missionary grabs his Bible and holds it out and says, not word for word, but basically, Jesus, get rid of this horrible monster and save me and these unwashed pagans behind me. And the creature went, wow, and jumped back and submerged back into the water. And he turned around and he goes, you see, you heathens, that's what Jesus can do. Jesus scares away the monsters. And they're like, whoa, that's a pretty big selling point, right? You're saying all this stuff about my soul and everlasting peace, but Jesus fight monsters. Is there more stories like that in the book? And missionary, his eyes are going side to side. Yeah, there's tons of crazy stories. Jesus even fights a dragon. They're like, what? That's the first sighting of the Loch Ness Monster. So, I've always said at some point there probably was something in there. Do I think that happened? Probably not. But I don't know. That's become my new catchphrase after yesterday's episode. Probably not, but I don't know. Maybe it was a demonic monster. Maybe it was connected to the realms of hell. Maybe Jesus does fight monsters, physical monsters, old dinosaurs that have been lost in the underground cave networks that honeycomb this planet. Or it was a made-up story. And it was a way for the missionary to be like, that's why you guys should become Christians, because if a monster ever shows up, Jesus will make him run away. It's a pretty good selling point for a religion. But so the Loch Ness Monster to me has always been, I go, maybe at some point in human history there was some sort of big creature there. We talked about the Wowie last week, this giant monster that was eating Aborigines, wipe out a whole tribe in the middle of the night. And it's this ancient legend. It turns out that it was based on this real creature that's the biggest lizard to ever walk on land. And we have the fossil record to prove it. I think it could have been something like that. At some point, they were encountering an ancient, or something we would consider ancient beast. But it's long gone. I don't think that there's ever been a family of Nessies, or that modern day photos are really anything. So you could have done that story. You're like, yeah, Jason, you just did that story in 5 minutes. You could have done that. Don't do the kitten story. Well, who knows what's going to show up next on Dead Rabbit Radio. At least this episode, I promise. No feces. Mr. Slash for Sass, let's go ahead and touch the keys to the world. Famous Carpenter Copter, we are leaving behind a small neighborhood and the Loch Ness. Why don't you fly us all the way out to a sleepy suburban neighborhood? The story takes place in the 2020s, so very, very recent story. And we are living in this sleepy suburban neighborhood. It's a good neighborhood, a safe neighborhood. Actually, I don't know if any of those things are true. I'm just assuming. They don't even say it takes place in the suburbs, but trying to paint a picture for you. We're laying there on the front lawn of our house, have a nice ice-cold glass of orange juice in each hand, and glug-glug-glugging it up. Who doesn't love, Jason, 2 glasses of orange juice? It might be too much. No, it's not. It's never enough. I'm drinking all this orange juice. And that's when I take another sip of my orange juice. But you might have had a different experience. Maybe I look over at you and you also took a sip of orange juice and you look at me and you give me a thumbs up and a wink. Or I look over at you and your face is filled with fright. You're terrified. And you stare at me waiting to see my reaction. But I'm just waiting to take another drink of delicious orange juice. The story was posted by a young woman. We don't have a real name. We're going to call her Madeline. A couple of years ago, around 6 a.m, Maddie was sitting at home with her mom, when all of a sudden they hear, "Ah!" Now, that doesn't really adequately describe what they heard. Obviously I have neighbors. I can't scream at the top of my lungs, although I'm sure they can hear me just talking normally. What Maddie and her mother heard was a scream, a woman's scream. And the only way they could both describe it was it sounded like true terror. Wasn't a scream because her boyfriend picked her up. It wasn't a scream because she saw Harry Styles dancing on TV or something like that. It wasn't a scream of joy or a squeal type scream. None of those screams that we always hear women give. No. Only a very few amount of us have ever heard a woman scream in terror. And that's what Maddie and her mother heard that morning. And their immediate reaction was, oh my God, like somebody's hurt. Somebody's hurt, because they knew it wasn't a joke. They knew it wasn't playful. True terror. So their first reaction is like, where did the scream come from? And how can we help? They immediately go outside and they're kind of looking around the neighborhood and they don't see anyone that's been hit by a car or running out of their house covered in blood or anything. But because it was such a piercing, emotion-laden scream, they decide to call 911, even though they don't know who did it or where it came from. They know that it's close. That's all they know. They call the cops. It probably is a safe neighborhood, a good neighborhood, if the cops quickly responded to a call like this. Hey, we don't know what's going on. We just heard a woman scream at the top of her lungs. Because, other neighborhoods are like, oh yeah, we'll get right there. We first have to handle all of these drive-bys. And there's some guy following people. He keeps going, I'm not ICE. I'm not ICE, as he's following random people around the city. But we'll find out who that lunatic is in a second. In a sleepy suburban town, the cops are going to be there right away. So the cops come out. And Maddie and her mom kind of say the same thing they told the 911 operator. We don't know where the scream came from. We don't know who screamed or why, but we both heard it. So the cops kind of start to, knock on neighbors' doors. And one of their neighbors, who we will call Sally, she comes out of her house when she sees the police show up. And when the police are talking to Maddie and her mom, Sally comes out. And Sally says to the cops, hey, are you guys here because of that screaming? Because I heard it too. That was terrifying. And Maddie and her mom are like, yeah, we called 911. Do you know where it came from? And the police... And Sally goes, no, I have no idea where that came from. I don't know who screamed. Super concerning, though, so I'm glad the cops are here. And the cops end up talking to Sally, talking to Maddie and her mom. They then begin talking to other people in the neighborhood, trying to figure out where this scream came from. Well, Maddie, though, this is a school day. This is at 6 a.m, so Maddie gets ready. She goes to school. You figure, at a certain point, you go, maybe it was a joking scream. Right? Maybe someone's television was too loud. You would hope that was the case. But Maddie has to get on with her day, so she's like, that's weird, but I gotta go to school. She goes to school. And when she comes back, there's still police officers in the neighborhood. And that's when she goes, oh, they must have found out where that scream came from. There's more cops here than there were when I left. So they must have come out to... The cops are still here. I mean, they've been working, How long does school last? 8 hours or whatever? I'm assuming that she's in high school. Cops must have been here all day. And maybe they found it. They would have had to find out who screamed by now. But no. They were actually still canvassing the area, trying to figure it out. That's how seriously they were taking this. And again, this is probably how low crime this area is. But as the police went from house to house, doing a welfare check, someone's there asking them, did you hear someone scream around 6 a.m? And neighbors are obviously talking about this amongst each other, gossiping. They're trying to figure it out as well. A narrative becomes clear in this neighborhood. A screaming woman was heard at 6 a.m. A scream that turned your blood ice cold. It was just so frightening to hear this scream. But only the women heard it. Only the women in this neighborhood heard that scream. And, the neighborhood's talking to each other about this. And they're really trying to piece this together. Could it be that only women heard the scream? Why would that just isn't possible. That doesn't make any sense. Well, one of the things, among these discussions they were all having, because now, it's still a story. You still wonder who got hurt, but you'd have to go... at this point, it would remove it from the idea that, oh my God, there might be a woman somewhere in one of these houses in the neighborhood who's dead or dying because she got attacked. She let off this scream and we haven't found her yet. But when you start to go, wait, only the women heard it? Now it's a different issue. There still might be a woman who's dead or dying. But now you have this other wrinkle in it. And so, among the conversations that they had, not just that day, but going forward, because it's such an unusual event for this neighborhood, there were these other narratives that came out. At 6 in the morning in one of these houses, a woman and her husband were standing together right next to each other. And the woman heard this horrible scream echo through the neighborhood. And she turns to her husband and she goes, oh my God, did you hear that? And the husband looks at her and says, no, what are you talking about? What'd you hear? And they were standing right next to each other when that scream was heard. So it's not a women were up, maybe they were getting ready for work, a husband was still asleep, or their husband was at work and they're stay-at-home wives. It wasn't anything like that. Of why only women heard it. That would be the easy way, right? You go, well, only women heard it because only women were awake or only women were in this neighborhood. No. Husband and wife standing next to each other. She heard it, he didn't. Even more amazing, we've been talking about this topic the past 2 weeks. There was a woman in this neighborhood who is deaf. Let's call her Natalie. Natalie lived just a few doors down from Maddie and her mother. She was deaf. She didn't use hearing aids. She heard the scream at 6 in the morning. Maddie posted this online and she ended it by saying, quote, "We still don't know what happened, and everyone who lived here at the time is still freaked out about it." Unquote. So no resolution. Like, you could at least have a little bit of resolution if a woman was found. I mean, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but if a woman was found all stabbed up down by the reservoir, just around the corner from the neighborhood, or a woman was found, she'd been clubbed over the head, she was bleeding out in her kitchen. Now, those aren't good things. I'm not saying I would hope those things would happen, but that would be at least a partial resolution. No one would want that, but it would at least be a partial resolution to the story. Okay, so now we know who screamed and why they screamed. Why did only women hear it? Who knows? It would kind of become just a moot point at that. But they never found out who screamed or why they screamed. And they never ever found out why only women in the neighborhood heard it. It's a true local mystery. I'd love to find out where this neighborhood is. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating story. What happened was recently, I did an episode about a little troll man who would appear in this dude's bedroom, but he never saw it. This little short, I don't know if he was actually a troll, but he was a short guy who would hide behind the television set in his room, and he never knew it was there, but multiple girls that he had brought over to his place who would spend the night there would freak out. Because they would say, there's a tiny man, not tiny, but like a short man, hiding behind the television set. He's crouched down behind the television set. And I commented in that episode, I said, I can't think of a time when ghosts would only be visible to man or woman. To male or female. I go, that sounded odd in that story. I go, well, that's kind of... I wasn't saying the story was fake. I go, I just never come across that before. And what's interesting is, I have to consume so much content to produce the show. So I read hundreds of accounts a week, whether it's a news article or something like this. And, dozens and dozens a day to find the 6 stories that I'm going to present. There's a lot of stuff that I have to throw off. And just randomly, I came across this one. And I go, okay. Right? I mean, again, on that episode, I go, this is weird. I haven't really heard of a paranormal phenomenon that would only affect a man or only affect a woman. And then I find this one just accidentally. Wasn't looking for it. But I will be honest. In the back of my mind, I didn't know I was going to find this story. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking about it. I was thinking more about that. Are there other accounts that only women would encounter? And a longtime supporter of the show, constantly in the YouTube comments, I've seen you for years, Graven, thank you so much for this. They actually posted in the commentary for that video I did. The episode was called Dream House, and it was about the little dwarf man behind the television set. I posted that, and he also said, he goes, listen, I haven't come across any stories that involve only a man can hear it, only a woman can hear it. But, this was interesting, he goes, but I've heard of curses in a family targeting just the men or the women. And I go, yeah, that is true. I could see that. I can't think of a story we've covered. I'm sure we have. But like Gravin, I've heard those stories before, right? The curse being passed down on the mother's side to her daughter and her granddaughter and great-granddaughter. So we do have magical workings that can specifically target one gender. He goes, also, didn't you talk about a haunted hotel? It was the Stanley Hotel. He goes, didn't you once talk about I'll put this episode in the show notes. It's actually depressing to listen to because I recorded it on my birthday when everyone forgot it was my birthday. So it's like I didn't want to record it, but it was like episode 60 or whatever. I had to record it because I had to do a daily show and I'm old sad. But anyways, just preparing you for that if you do listen to it. I should do a behind the scenes for that episode. I haven't listened to it in years. He goes, you did an episode about a haunted hotel and there was a ghost in a closet and the ghost said only interact with women. So you have covered things where ghosts only interact with women. And he's right, actually. See, I'd forgotten about that, but that is true. And I was there for that experience. I'll tell the story real quick because it's still one of the, I'd say, top 50 most bizarre moments of my paranormal life. Just, it was so odd. We were on a ghost tour at the Stanley Hotel, and there was a closet. Basically the same setup that I just said. And the tour guide was this young woman dressed in like old-timey clothing. And she's like, ooh, and yes, here is a haunted closet in this room. He's quite the Randy spirit. If a woman goes in there, you'll feel him like feel you up. He'll cop a ghost feel. So he'd pinch your butt or play with your boobs or whatever. And he just likes to grab women. If men go in there, he doesn't do anything. But if a woman goes in there, you will feel the phantom touch of this perverted old man who died 100 years before anyone in this room was born. Who wants to go in there? Any volunteers? And, men, we couldn't go in there. But she was asking if a woman wanted to go in there, and then they'd shut the closet door, and they'd open it a minute or two later, and the woman would come out. And she would go, oh yeah, no, that was that was super disgusting. I got violated by this ghost. He's playing with my nipples. She goes, any volunteers? And there was a young girl there, maybe like 14 or something like that, 12 or 14, I don't know. A young girl. And she raises her hand and she says, I'll go in there. And the tour guide all of a sudden became super serious and turned to her and looked and goes, you have to be 18 to go in the closet. And we were all kind of like standing there. We're like, wait, what? So here's the thing. It's a tour. It's a ghost tour. Sometimes they'll have a ghostly sighting there 15 years ago. It's still part of the ghost tour. Whatever. But the fact that they have an age limit, the fact that you have to be the age of consent for sex, the age of sexual consent, whatever the term would be, to go into an empty closet, we all go, oh, there actually is a perverted ghost in there right now. This is not some long-lost haunting. He's in there right now. And the rule is you have to be 18 so you can consent to get groped by a spirit. So, I go, yeah, why? If it was fake, you'd let anyone go in there. Honestly, they go, hey, gentlemen, go in there. He'll tug on your nuts a bit. So, and that is an example. Yeah, Gravin goes, you did a story where only women could experience a haunting. So he's right. Yeah, I had forgotten about that. But it was her reaction. It wasn't the ghost story part of it. That kind, we've heard of Randy ghosts before. We've heard of ghosts copping a feel. It was the fact that whatever was in that closet was so serious and so dangerous, you had to be 18 to go in there. Gravin, you are right. I have talked about it before. It doesn't make it any less odd, because think about it. Me and Gravin, and I'm sure all of you guys as well, we really had to rack our brains to think of other examples of this. Of a paranormal phenomenon only affecting women, or only affecting men. He's like, yeah, didn't you cover this before? But even then, it's not something off the tip of her tongue. So why? Well, that's the question. Why? It's funny because everything in my paranormal toolkit, I just don't know the answer to that question. Why? Now, to be fair, we picked the weirdest stories to cover on this show, so I guess it's kind of a trap of my own making, but, well, there's two questions here. Why did only women hear it? Is that a spiritual thing? Is that a chemical in the brain type of thing? Or even just I was going to say frequency of hearing, but I think men and women's hearing is pretty equal. But then you have the deaf woman, so it wouldn't matter at all. The question is, why did only women hear it? And then the question is, what was the phenomenon in the first place? I honestly think that I might have an answer for the second question, and it might lead us into the first question. When I read this story, what it felt like to me was a psychic scream. Now, they heard it audibly. It wasn't telepathy into their head. But I wonder if a woman in that general area, maybe even in that same neighborhood, and never admitted to anything, was being hurt in such a way that she let off a psychic scream. No one was killed. We know that because no bodies were found, unless a guy was able to... Well, here's the thing. It wasn't a physical scream, because then everyone would have heard it. I don't think it was a murder, because no one ever talked about someone missing. Maybe he picked up some prostitute from the other side of town and brought her back to his house. I mean, I guess that's possible. But, there's no body found. There's no blood anywhere. He would have had a pretty limited amount of time to get this body out of his house and into the truck and get out of there, because there were cops there all day long. They showed up in the morning. They were there all day long. But there's a lot of things that can happen to somebody that could cause a psychic scream. Rape would be one of them. Abuse, physical abuse, or even emotional abuse. I can't think of many more. I mean, I could. If I wanted to get really dark, like you have someone and you have a box of kittens. Let's just say a box of kittens, and you go, there's 9 kittens in this box. You choose which one I don't kill. And the woman's like, oh my God, those are my favorite kittens. And I can only pick one. And he's like, yeah, pick one. She's all confused. She's like, I know you're trying to torment me, but do I pick the one I want you to kill or the one I want to save? Yeah, she only gets to save one, and then any of the remaining 8 I may murder with my bare hands. And she goes, ah, but not with her voice, but psychically. That's probably not it, right? You're all sad. You're all, which kitten would I pick? Oh, I'd grab armfuls and I'd run out of the house. Probably nothing like that. But what I'm saying is, I imagine a woman let out a psychic scream. Something happened to her, and she wasn't able to physically scream, or if she did physically scream, it would make the situation worse. So she let out a psychic scream. I mean, it could also be a ghost. Could have been a UFO with the busted alternator, and that's the noise it makes as it's flying overhead. Who knows? But I'm just picking the example that I thought of when I read this. She lets off a psychic scream, and she's screaming for her sisters. She's screaming for the fellow women in this neighborhood. She's screaming for help. And only the women could hear it because they were the only ones she was psychically screaming to. That would answer both questions, really. That would answer both questions. What is it? I thought it was a psychic scream. Why did only women hear it? Because she was only screaming out to her sisters, to her fellow women in this neighborhood. Fascinating. It'll be one of those stories, I think, that I'll still kind of think about. I'll probably never come to an answer. They never will either. That's the thing. It was a one-off thing that happened in a neighborhood, and everyone who lives there every so often will go, hey, remember that weird thing that happened? That shared psychic experience with the women in this neighborhood. But they'll never have any answers. They'll never know who screamed or why. All they will remember is that morning when they heard a fearful scream of a woman. A woman they could not save. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.